Pallbearers? Pallbearers? Yeah. Head that way. We're ready. Jack will give you the instructions on where to stand and when. Thank you. Thank you. I'm ready. You're ready? I'm ready. Sorry. Okay, let's go. Esainai el heharim me'ayin yavo ezri Esainai el heharim me'ayin yavo ezri Ezri me'im Adonai Osei shamayim va'aretz Ezri me'im Adonai Osei shamayim va'aretz Aiten lamod raglecha Al yanum shomrecha Hine lo yanum velo ishan Shomer Yisrael Adonai shomrecha Adonai tzilcha yad yeminecha Adonai shomrecha Adonai tzilcha yad yeminecha Yomam hashemesh lo yakeka ve'yareach balayla Adonai yishmorcha mikora Yishmor et nafshecha Adonai yishmor tzedcha uvoecha me'ata ve'ad olam Adonai yishmor tzedcha uvoecha me'ata ve'ad olam Al mekomo yavo v'shalom
Psalm 121 is called Shir LaMa'alot, a song for ascending. I turn my eyes to the mountains, from where will my help come? My help comes from Adonai, from God, maker of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way, your guardian will not slumber. You see, the guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. God is your protection, your guardian at your right hand. By day the sun will not strike you, nor the moon by night. God will guard you from all harm. God will guard your life. God guards your going and coming now and forever. May Robert Carr go unto God in peace. Hatzur tamim paulo ki chol drachav mishpat el emunah v'einav el tzadik v'yasharhu. Tzadik atadonai la'amidu la'chayot asher b'yadcha pikadon kol ruchot chalil lecha zichronenu limchot. V'yihiu na'inech berachamim aleinu fekuchot ki lecha adon harachamim ve'aslichot. Adonai natan v'Adonai lakach yehi shem Adonai mevorach. V'hu rachum yechaper avon v'lo yashchit v'hirba lashiva po v'lo yirko chamato v'yashov he'afar al harashaya v'aruach tashuv el ha'elohim asher netana. The dust returns to the earth as it was, but the spirit returns to God who gave it. May our beloved soul be bound up in the bond of life eternal, and may God send comfort to those who mourn and grant strength to those whose burden is sorrow. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. Thank you. Whether you're with us here at the cemetery or you're joining us on the net, thank you for joining together with us to honor Robert Carr. Yerachmiel Mordechai ben David ve'Esther, the son of Esther and David Carr, Zichronam Livracha, of blessed memory. Robert passed away Monday after a lengthy battle with Parkinson's disease. It was the 21st day in the Hebrew month of Tammuz. He was 75. He would have turned 76 later this month. In Jewish tradition, we have this saying. Maybe you've heard me say it before. Death is better than a life of pain, and eternal rest is better than a constant sickness. I've said this so many times at funerals recently, it seems, that I've kind of lost sense of what it means. A pain so terrible that death would be better than life. I'm not going to make anyone admit it, but I will tell you that as I stand here, I am scared to die. But from everything that his family told me and from the sense that I get, towards the end, and possibly for longer than he ever would admit, Robert Carr, I believe, was scared to live. That's a kind of pain I cannot even begin to fathom. Which is why that line makes perfect sense. Something that sucks the life out of life. Our hope, our prayer, as friends, family, and a community joining together, is that after what seemed like endless pain and suffering, Robert is finally at peace. He is survived by his family, his wife Sean, his children, Jill and Alex, David and Sarah, his grandchildren, Isabel, Izzy, Nora, and Rowena, Winnie, his brother Al and sister-in-law Fern, sister-in-law Colleen, nieces, nephews, cousins, friends, and many former colleagues. Thank you again to all of you who are here with us today. Robert was predeceased by his parents, David and Esther, as well as by his dear brother, Jim. We have the privilege today of hearing from Sean, Jill, and David, who will share personal stories that serve as a fitting eulogy to Robert Carr's life. After all, that's what our tradition teaches. The ultimate form of respect we can show someone from our community is to accompany him to his final resting place, to pay tribute to his life, to celebrate him. By introduction, I have the opportunity of reminding us, because many of us already know, one of the best things that can be said about a person is he was interesting. He did interesting things. He lived an interesting life. Robert Carr certainly was that. A peaceful childhood growing up in River Heights, the occasional motorcycle ride without a helmet, getting himself into a fair bit of trouble. In fact, even though the odds were slightly stacked against him when he deliberately failed his grade 12 final history exam at Grant Park so he wouldn't be allowed to go to university, Robert somehow pulled it together and ended up in law school at the University of Manitoba. While still in school, he was instrumental in establishing the University Legal Aid Clinic. From there, he went on to obtain a master's from Harvard Law School, which culminated in his must-read 1972 thesis, Marijuana and the Legal Profession. True story, I held it in my hands. It's a real thing. Also real, he was then accepted into Harvard Medical School, but chose to return home, possibly, as he told his son, to marry Sean, possibly to do what he did in his career, to practice law with Darcy McCaffrey, with whom he had worked as a student. Under McCaffrey, Robert had tremendous opportunities to gain early experience, which quickly advanced his career as a lawyer. Amazingly, he was appointed a part-time judge of the Manitoba Provincial Court when he was just 29, and a full-time judge of the Court of Queen's Bench, which now, of course, is the King's Bench, at the age of just 36. Difficult to fact-check, but possibly a Canadian record for age. During this time, he also taught family law at the Manitoba Law School and was very involved with judicial education through organizations like the National Judicial Institute and the Canadian Institute for the Administration of Justice. When Federal Judicial Affairs established a new communication network for judges in the 80s, it was Robert who traveled the country to train judges how to use it. Certainly interesting, and that's just in his career. Not to mention his talents, his skills as a father, a husband, a brother, uncle, and friend, beyond just his impressive and interesting legal career. Because even better to be said about you than being interesting is that you were a mensch, a good person, honest, straightforward, and true. This was also Robert Carr. I'm told his colleagues on the bench recognized this in him, even though he was so much more junior than many of them, and slightly of a different style and way about the law and life. They saw him as someone mature beyond his years as a fellow judge. They saw him wise, sage, trustworthy. The other judges would come to Robert for advice. Not for legal advice, no, never actually. They went for the things that really weighed on them, that plagued their souls. Raccoons in the attic and how to get rid of them. Leaky toilets and how to fix them. A wart on his wife's toe and what to do about that. When Moses was close to the end of his life, God had to appoint a successor for Moses, and he picked Joshua, who had some fame as one of the spies, one of the righteous spies, and a few other stories throughout the Torah. God describes Joshua as I imagine he or we could describe Robert Carr. Ish asher bo ruach, a man in whom there is spirit, an inspired man. Or as a friend of mine who had Robert Carr as a professor in university told me just this morning, he just had a way about him. He had it as a judge. He had it as a family man. He had it as a friend. Funny, brilliant, talented, calm, patient, and wise. Honest and true. A mensch. It says in the Talmud, monuments need not be erected for the righteous. Their deeds will speak their praise. May Robert Carr rest in peace, but may he live on in the memories he created in every life he touched. Sean.
I fell in love with Robert because he made me laugh, and he continued to do so through 48 years of marriage. But of course, his sense of humor was not his only good quality. He had an impressive legal career, and he was an accomplished cook and a good amateur photographer. In the days before digital cameras, when we had a darkroom set up in our basement, he took portraits of members of Manitoba's Faculty of Law that still line the walls of Robson Hall. But he should be remembered not for his skills as a jurist or a cook or a photographer, but for his humanity. He was unlike anyone else I have ever known. Robert has always loved children, and before our kids were born, he spent a lot of time entertaining or babysitting our friends' kids. One of those kids, Susie Rich, summed it up best in a text she sent this week to my daughter. She said, "When I was small, I thought that a Robert was something you could be when you grew up, and I wanted to grow up to be a Robert." Someone said that a great man is one who does not lose his child's heart. Well, Robert was the master of silliness, and children and adults loved it. I can tell you that I did not always get the joke. He wrote me many letters from Harvard. Unfortunately, he had his Venezuelan roommate first translate the letters into Spanish, knowing full well that I didn't speak Spanish, nor did I know a translator. I still don't know what the letters said. Robert was kind and compassionate, caring and affectionate. He was accepting of almost everything. He only hated two things: birds, thanks to Alfred Hitchcock, and anchovies. He looked for the best in everyone and tried to get others to do the same. One of his tricks when he was trying to settle a bitter family dispute was to ask each of the parties, who were most anxious to malign their partners to him, to tell him 3 good things about the other. It usually worked to tone down the animosity. Robert had no airs and no desire to impress anyone. He was actually proud of being a bad dresser. We never fought except when I tried to get him to throw out his hush puppies. Who knew they would come back into style 40 years later? It was important to Robert that everyone was treated with the same degree of respect, regardless of their degree of skill. He actually did suffer fools gladly, but he was in awe of anyone who did anything well, whether it was a tradesperson, a professional athlete, or a Nobel laureate. The people he envied most were the jacks of all trades who could fix anything. He often told me that he would give up law if he could be a good handyman. Robert liked to make sure that credit was given where credit was due. While it is not uncommon for people to complain to a store or restaurant manager about poor service, I think it is uncommon for people to do the opposite, that is to say, to report good service. I remember going with Robert to the airport to get our Nexus cards. The woman we dealt with there was very pleasant, although I can't say that her job was unique or demanding. It was a mundane job. Nevertheless, Robert asked for her manager's email address, and when we got home, he wrote to the manager to tell him what a good job the woman had done, and that was something he did often. Yeah, I want to finish it, but I want to do it sitting down. My husband was a modest person. After 30 years on the bench, he declined a retirement reception in his honor, and I think he would be cringing now at the nice things people are saying about him. Robert was the most even-tempered person I know. In that sense, he was my foil. He never lost his temper, never raised his voice, never seemed angry. In these last years of his struggle with Parkinson's, I was angry a lot. I was angry that he was a prisoner of his body's rigidity, a common symptom of Parkinson's. I was angry that he couldn't engage with our grandchildren the way that he would have liked to. They will never get to know the real Robert. But he wasn't angry or bitter. At the end, he said that he felt he had a lucky life, but it is I and our kids who are the lucky ones for having lived with and been loved by him. My darling Robert, while I can no longer feel the warmth of your body, your memory will always be my guiding light. Sit down to speak.
I'll try to stand. Goth in the sun, so we'll see if I faint. I met Robert Carr at the Women's Hospital on October 4th, 1978. Just moments prior to my birth, he and my mom were laying in separate hospital beds, her because she was in labor, him because he was overwhelmed. He was a sensitive type, and according to his stories, this was the biggest moment of his life. His nerves didn't stop him from photographing the event, and he didn't bother to wait until I was cleaned up, so for anyone who's interested, I have photos of myself looking like a fake baby in an alien movie. Dad said, "This is your proof, you're ours." About 5 minutes in, I began looking like his twin, so the photos were really only necessary evidence for about a week. In my childhood, quirky stories like this were shared regularly. Mostly stories about how much he loved his kids and how lucky he was. My mom said she'd find him gazing at us in our cribs. "He used to watch you sleep," she'd say. Robert made everything fun and special. When we were small, he added a special touch to every little thing we did. We couldn't fall asleep at night, he would give us some night water. What was night water? It was a glass bottle in the fridge with tap water in it. All you needed was a tiny cup of it and you'd be ready for sleep. At Winnipeg Beach, we'd go on late-night walks to the Special Bridge, which was just a normal bridge that our dad named Special. And late-night walks were at 7 p.m. By the time I was 4, Robert was asking me for legal advice. He'd sit on my bedside and tell me about a case that involved little kids, and he'd ask me for a child's perspective. Most parents would do this to make their kid feel important or to see what cute remark they'd make, but Robert asked me because he had genuine respect for kids, and he really valued our input. He really valued each and every relationship he had. He genuinely felt each person had something valuable to contribute, and each conversation was a learning opportunity. He'd follow people around who were working on our house, and he'd ask all sorts of questions about their work and their lives. He got to know every friend of ours who walked through our house, and each of them felt so comfortable in his company. Some of my shyest friends have texted me this week, and they all say the same thing. "Your dad made me feel accepted, and I felt like I could be myself with him." When David would invite friends over in high school, he'd come upstairs from his bedroom, wondering why the friend was so late for him, and then he'd find the friend had been sitting and talking to Robert for an hour, and sometimes after that they'd leave. And not surprisingly, Robert was a world-class Zeta. Grandpa, for those of you who don't know what a Zeta is. Despite the fact that he couldn't be the Zeta he would have wanted to be, he lit up each time the girls came running into the house yelling for him. Dave and Sarah and Alex and I all feel so lucky that our girls got to know our dad, even though, as my mom said, he was never able to be his full self with them. When I thought I was going to pass out until I saw everyone actually, which helped me and lifted me, I was thinking if I could only read one thing, I would read his note from the Tooth Fairy because I have 1,000 Tooth Fairy notes from him. So I'll just read one because he would want us to laugh. "Jilly, once again you have given me one of the best teeth I've ever received. Thank you for that. I understand more teeth are coming. Good. I love teeth. Miss T Fairy."
My dad was my hero, and I remember having this feeling about him from my earliest childhood memories. I looked up to my dad in every aspect of his life on each and every day of the 40 years we got to spend together. I'm also very well aware that I was not the only person who felt this way about him. My dad was one of the most caring and even-tempered people I have ever known, and one memory stands out in this regard. It was midwinter, and my buddy Beaner and I took a drive to Winnipeg Beach to check things out. We drove my mum's SUV right up to the lake when we noticed what appeared to be an ice road. It was not. Not knowing that, we proceeded to hit the gas and head out on our ice exploration. About a kilometer offshore, I let up on the gas, and the car gradually sank into the snow until it hit the ice. We called the tow truck, and when the driver arrived, he said, "I don't have a 1 kilometer tow chain. You'll have to wait for the ice to melt." He laughed, but then agreed to take us to Eddie's Gravel, where a young man came to our rescue with a front-end loader to plow an actual ice road so we could drive off the lake. 95% of the way through his task, he accidentally hit the lever that spins the digging arm of the machine around. The shovel end of the digger hit the front of the SUV at full speed, knocking the car off its axle, smashing in the front end, etc., etc.
After I collected my thoughts, I knew I had to call my dad. This was going to be a particularly tough call given the fact that I had done something quite similar the year before. After explaining to my dad what had happened, he replied very calmly, asked if Beaner and I were okay, and said, "Don't worry, I'll take care of your mom." He told us to get home safe and said to me, "Son, I love you, and you won't do this again, eh?" And there was no way I ever would, although there's some disagreement about that. Years ago, I was pulled over for allegedly rolling through a stop sign with my friend Harry. The police officer came and took my license and went back to his car. When he came back to the car, he asked if Justice Carr was my dad. I said yes, and I was thinking, I'm going to get off because my dad's a judge. He proceeded to tell me that my dad was the judge when he went through a very bad divorce, and he said he wanted to show me the respect that he and his ex-wife were both shown by my dad in court. A small note here, my mom was cringing at me telling this story with impropriety and judges, but when I told it to Robert, he loved it. My dad had a way of connecting with people. It might be uncommon to see one's plumber or contractor at their funeral, but Kevin and Matt were not tradespeople. To us, they're part of our family, and that's because my dad built friendships with every person he met. One may have started over a leaky sink or a roof repair, but they evolved into sharing stories, meals, and most recently, exchanging recipes. Kevin makes a world-class borscht. Both of these guys would leave any project they were on to come help my dad if he needed it, especially in the last few years. Kevin was not the only person my dad exchanged recipes with. After developing a fondness for the writing of top-selling author Jodi Picoult, Robert decided to drop her an email, say he was a fan, and send her a new recipe he was working on. Shockingly, not only did she reply, but they quickly became pen pals, and my family still makes Jodi's outstanding chicken and dumpling stew. My dad knew how to get things accomplished, and some of his best work came out of his creativity under pressure. A favorite example of this was when we had a family trip booked to Washington, D.C., and were in need of a last-minute hotel. This was during the Clinton administration, and so when the woman at the Embassy Suites informed my dad the hotel was booked, he immediately replied, "What a shame it came so highly recommended by the Clintons." Shockingly, after a brief hold, a room magically became available, although it still seems a bit odd to me that the Clintons would have recommended the Embassy Suites with all the great hotels in D.C. My dad supported absolutely everything my sister and I did, no matter what it was. I remember years ago calling my mom and simply saying, "I'm on the ground." She naturally replied, "Why would you not be on the ground?" "Well, because I just jumped out of a plane." And, of course, my dad was waiting for me on the ground with a huge smile on his face as though I just graduated from Harvard. It didn't matter what we were doing, our happiness made him happy, and we got to be happy together all the time. While I feel blessed for every minute of the time I had with my dad, it's hard to imagine continuing life without him, but I will spend the rest of my life telling Robert stories to my girls and trying every day to be even half the dad, husband, and friend that he was.
Thank you, Sean, Jill, and David, for your beautiful eulogies for Robert. It's an honor now to chant in Robert's memory the El Malei Rachamim, the traditional Jewish memorial prayer. El Malei Rachamim, Shoched Babromim, Hamsei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Hashchina B'malot Kedoshim Uteorim Kezohar Arakia Mazhirim Et Nishmat Yerachmiel Mordechai Ben David Vester She'alach le'olamo Began Eidente Menuchato Anabal Harachamim Hastireu Beseter Kenafecha Leolamim Utzror Bitzror Achaim Enishmato Adonai Hu Nachalato V'yanuach V'shalom Al Mishkavo V'nomar Amen. Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure to the soul of Robert Carr, who is gone to his eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that he find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May his soul be bound up in the bond of life. May he rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. Thank you again, everyone, for tuning in or for being here. Those of you who are in attendance or are able to get there, there will be a meal of consolation, both in Robert's honor and as our thoughts turn to comforting the family at Ray and Jerry's. Everyone is invited to attend. In a moment, we'll conclude our service with the recitation of the Mourner's Kaddish and then the familiar ritual of shoveling earth into the grave. This picks up on what we mentioned at the beginning of our service, that in Jewish tradition, the ultimate respect is to accompany a loved one to his final resting place. This is the true definition of that. We believe our loved ones should be buried by our own hands, hands that once held their hands. So the family will lead us, and everyone else is invited to participate. It's a mitzvah. It's a righteous act we do selflessly, without any hope of reward. We do it for someone who meant so much, clearly, to so many people. And though it is a painful act, we remind ourselves it is an act born of love and compassion. When it comes to the ritual itself, most people pour 3 shovelfuls of earth. But there are different customs, and we always encourage people to embrace the custom with which they are familiar. Every ritual should have meaning behind it and intention. 3 shovelfuls of earth. Some people use the front of the shovel, some people use the back. Some people return the shovel to the earth as if reluctant to pass on the tradition. Some people pass it to the next person. It's a shared community responsibility. Again, whatever resonates is what you should choose. If we can set up 2 lines. There are multiple shovels. We can make that happen for after the family goes. But there's also, you may not be able to see it on your side, but on our side in front of the pile there is a pail with a small shovel and sand in it. In case you don't are a little bit weary of using the big shovel in the earth, you can still accomplish the mitzvah by using the pail and the small shovel that is within it. So again, we thank you. We encourage you to continue to reach out to the family with phone calls, emails, text messages, to continue sharing the Robert stories in the days and weeks and months to come to help the family through what is clearly a painful and difficult time as they have now entered grief and mourning. Let's conclude with the Mourner's Kaddish. And as we do, we echo the words of Job, the epitome of suffering in Jewish tradition, which we mentioned in the introduction. Adonai natan v'Adonai lakach, yehi shem Adonai mevorach. God has given, God has taken, blessed be the name of God. May Robert Carr be a blessing, as we mark that his essence will never leave our hearts and our souls. The Mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabah. Be'alma divra chirute v'yamlich malchute. B'chayechon uvyomechon uvchaye dechol beit Yisrael. Ba'agala uvizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehi shmei Rabah mevarach le'alam u'lalmei almaya. Yiparach v'ishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitale v'yitalal shemei dekudsha b'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shlama Rabah min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May the one who creates peace and harmony on high bring peace and harmony to us, to all Israel, to all humanity. And together again we say, Amen. To the family we say, Hamakom yenachem etchem betoch sha'ara ve'lei Tzion v'Yerushalayim. May you be comforted and consoled among all those in our community who are or who have ever been in mourning. Thank you again, everyone. Family. That was 100% for you, but just for you.